So these eunuchs, they love to kind of foil things and mess things. And so it was a eunuch who whispers into the ear of the king, by the way, Haman, that evil Haman, he already built a gallows to kill Mordecai. Why don't you hang him on it? You know, it was a eunuch who pushed Queen Jezebel to her death. Did you know that? One queen taking revenge on another in that story. So. Yes. And you know, I do, it is true that the wise men were gay. They're for two reasons, I know this. For two reasons. One, they dressed fabulously. Now, come on, you know that, right? Two, they went shopping before they went to see the baby Jesus. Right? So this story is full of eunuchs. I think they named 10 or 11 of them, and powerful people. And you know, in all the book of Esther, the name of God is never mentioned. But God's invisible hand is there. In that tremendous, very early version of silence equals death. Did you hear that? Silence equals death. You know, we have a choice. We can be silent or we can speak up. In history, we can be silent. We can speak up against oppression, our own oppression, the oppression of others. God acts through God's servant in the book of Esther. MCC, Greater St. Louis, you are coming into your own for such a time as this. And God has been with you. God has been on your side. God has been helping you all this time in three ways, I think. Number one, to end the violence and the suffering. To end the violence and the suffering that our community has experienced for so many centuries. MCC's mission is to tear down walls and build up hope. When I became moderator 4 years ago, in the very first month that I became moderator, I read a story in the New York Times about a young man, Steve Harvey, who had been murdered in Jamaica. And I'd heard vague things that Jamaica was very lethal for gay and lesbian people. It's also a very, very religious country in many ways and has a history that's very complicated and a history that has a lot of tragedy in it, but began learning about this terrible situation of gay and lesbian people. And when I read about Steve Harvey's death, I called Human Rights Watch and I said, is there any way that MCC could be of help to gay and lesbian people in Jamaica? And she put me in touch with a young man who had been the roommate of the man who was murdered, Steve Harvey. And I spent about 5 hours with him in Miami in late 2005, hearing the most incredible stories from a 26-year-old man who had been active in the movement for about 9 or 10 years. He was one of the only leaders still left in his group. Others had been murdered and killed. To be so young and to have so much tragedy. And I asked him if he needed asylum or what is it that he needed. And he said, no, I have to care about my own people. I have to go back to Jamaica. They need us so much. And I said, well, what is it that MCC could do? What is it that you really need? And he said, we need spiritual community. We don't have a church. We don't have spiritual community. And so MCC Fort Lauderdale and Reverend Robert Griffin began working with people in Jamaica. And we have a church of 150 people in Kingston, Jamaica today. People come and bus from all over the island to come to worship services. I've worshiped with them. They're very Jamaican in their worship, and they're very MCC. It's the same spirit. God is with them as they are changing laws, as they are building allies. We're working with them to do a public education campaign in Jamaica against violence, against homophobic violence. And I ask you to pray about that. That we're able to do that. It's simply amazing. In Pakistan, there are gay and lesbian Christians who meet underground and who have a center for homeless youth, kids who are kicked out of their homes, and if their families find them, they will kill them because that's the culture, that's the belief. There are a group of lesbians, of young lesbians, who will be forced into arranged marriages, heterosexual marriages, unless they can get an education and set up a business in Pakistan. And if women can do that, they can have some measure of independence. We just sent 3 scholarships to 3 lesbians in Pakistan, where they were brought to Pakistan by Reverend Pat Baumgardner, to an agency that we partner with in Pakistan. And there are 17 women on a waiting list right now. It costs $1,500 to educate each one. And then they can have their business and their own space. Creating safe space. You know how you enjoy this space and what it means. And think about people around the world who long for that space. MCC in New York has a homeless queer shelter. They've helped about 300 teenagers and young kids get off the streets of MCC in New York over the last 5 or 6 years. One of them, his name is Renee, and I met Renee last year as they were going to the Dominican Republic. She was part of our youth mission trip to the Dominican Republic to help an orphanage and our young church there in the Dominican Republic. And I said, Renee is transgender, and I said, Renee, what is it that really motivated you to come on this trip? And she said, when I was 6 years old, my mother died of AIDS in Oklahoma, and my life fell apart. I ended up in New York City addicted to drugs. When I was 15 years old, I found Metropolitan Community Church and the homeless youth shelter, and they saved my life. She's in her 2nd year of college at the present time. An amazing woman. I said, why? And she said, because, Reverend Wilson, I'm so lucky. God has been so good to me, and I've got to give something back. And I thought, amazing. She says, I'm so lucky. This is what she knows. If it had not been for God with her, if it had not been overcoming the suffering and the violence, it's our calling. And then Esther, of course, teaches us about coming out, taking a risk, telling the truth. You know, one of the most freeing and amazing things about being who we are is the way in which telling the truth has healed us. Isn't that right in your life? Can everyone say amen? How the truth has healed us. Telling the truth. Isn't it amazing? And you know, you never get done telling the truth. There's just more and more to tell, isn't there? And more coming out to do. Isn't that the truth? Always, always coming out. And isn't it amazing? You know, Esther could have stayed in the closet. The king said, I'll give you half my kingdom. She could have just said, I'll take the money and run. But she didn't do it. She stood up to him and she said, what I really want is life for my people and my community. MCC Greater St. Louis, you're still coming out. I saw that last night, coming out into the wider community. And you're going to keep coming out. And the more you come out, the more God will bless all the risks you take. Because there are so many people just in this city who have no idea that there's a place like Metropolitan Community Church today, who need it so much and don't really know. I heard the 2 women Cemetery singing last night, and they wrote a song just for you. And I heard how much fun they had when they came to church, you know. It is one of the things about MCC, isn't it? We can laugh in church. We can cry, we can laugh, we can be ourselves. Coming out is part of the great gift